someone asks you to give a presentation, don't just open up your laptop and PowerPoint and start typing what you might want to present, but first think of what do you want to achieve.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast, brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. I'm Boris, the founder of the company and your host for this episode. And today we have one of the masterclass trainers at our upcoming conference, Present to Succeed, with us. Maarten is author of the book Slide Design, which unfortunately is only in Dutch, but it's in Dutch, at least for now. We'll see how that one goes. He'll probably tell us. He also works as a presentation coach with the incredible team at Presentation Agency Mr. President, who are based in Amsterdam. And I'm sure there's many more things that I can say. At the end of the day, there is a reason why he's one of the only 4 people who are delivering a masterclass at the conference. But let me stop here and say, Maarten, welcome to the podcast. And let's start from here. What did I miss?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, what did you miss? Well, you said I'm an author, but that's only just, that's actually started 2 years ago in 2019. That's when a publisher asked me to write a book about slide design. But, well, my main daily job is actually designing presentations and giving training in how to design presentations. So that's actually, that sums it up quite well, yeah.
Okay, so how did you... Not a planned question, but how did you, what happened? Like, how did you get into the presentation world, by the way?
Yeah, it was, I think then I have to go back to when I was doing my bachelor's in communications way back when. And I was invited on an internship at one of the most famous computer companies in the world called Apple. You might have heard of them. And I was doing my internship there for communication and education. We were standing at the beginning of the whole Steve Jobs schools, iPads and education. And what happened there is that I was always a fan of presentations and designing presentations. I did it in my high school. I did it in my bachelor's. And the first time I was there at Apple, I got my own iBook. It wasn't even a MacBook, but I got my own white iBook. I don't know if you remember those.
No.
And I used to use PowerPoint a lot in school. And then there they said, well, at Apple, we use Keynote. And Keynote for me was like, it was fantastic. It was so cool to use and to see the differences back then with PowerPoint. And I really got a fan of Keynote and started to make a lot of keynotes in my day-to-day job there. And after my internship, I was continuing there as an employee for 3 years, I guess. And people noticed that I was the one that really liked to make presentations. So I made them for myself and then for my boss and then for colleagues of mine. And well, you know, within a couple of years, I was making a lot of keynotes for a lot of employees at the Dutch headquarters of Apple's. And actually, after that, I come from a teacher family. I really love to teach people. My father is a teacher. My grandfather was a teacher. And well, there was something in me that wanted to teach as well. But then you have the question, what will you teach? Well, what are you good at? And for me, I was good at giving presentations and I was good at doing slide design. So I started to read in about it. And of course, my first presentation Bibles were, as everyone's, Duarte's Slideology and Gar Reynolds' presentations in. And for me, those opened the world to how you could use fantastic slides. And of course, there is a link between Duarte and Apple. And the 2 times a year back then, 2 or 3 times a year back then, when Apple climbed on stage, or Steve Jobs back then climbed on stage to do his product announcement, I was in love with the products. I had a little bit of a crush on Steve Jobs, but also I was in love with the way that this information was visualized in their slides. So everything came together after Apple, and I first thought, well, maybe I could do some development in sales, because then I have communication, design, and sales. Sounds like a great combination, but turned out sales is not for me. So I went back to the presentation world, and I started my own company as an independent trainer giving training on slide design and other presentation trainings and designing slides for companies. And yeah, so that was the beginning. And after that, at one time, I was asked to write a book. And after write a book, there were a lot of other companies I got involved with. And one of them is Mr. President, yeah.
So that is an interesting backstory, first of all.
Thanks.
The fact that you spent 3 or 4 years at Apple, even in the Dutch office, still is, I believe, is interesting to everyone, because Apple is that mystical type of thing, like, at least from the outside, it looks like very like secretive, and like it's very interesting to see somebody who worked for them. I personally know one more person who now runs a company for events, and they organize very big and very large, like, global events. And she was actually in the not the San Francisco, but in the US office, in the headquarters. So she was more or less part of the organization of all of those keynotes, etc. So it was obviously, the stories that she can tell are for sure something that is precious, but I'm sure that you have a lot of stories in regards to Apple. But my question would be, is it like, do you see, at least in Apple, this understanding of how important presentations are? Like, obviously Steve Jobs changed the world in so many ways, and the presentations that he was giving are, let's call them popular. But do you see that way of thinking all across Apple? Or is it something that was a little bit more specific to the high level executives? What do you think?
No, I think it's really throughout the whole company. I remember my first presentation I made, and I started my slides with the typical bullet points and the typical, I made those mistakes as well. And I remember that one of my first presentations that I made for my manager back then was for a quarterly business review. And he said, yeah, well, you could put the data in, but I want to send a message to them that this data that we put into our slides is promising data, that these numbers promise a very nice future for our department. So I want us to feel that these numbers are promising. And then I said, yeah, well, but the numbers are the numbers, right? And he said, well, no, but make it more visual, that it feels promising. And at first, I didn't understand what he meant. And then after some examples he gave me, he said, well, just put a visual of very tall growing trees next to the numbers that should be promising for our department. And I thought that was a ridiculous idea. I thought, wow, why should I put trees in my slide, high growing trees in my slide next to the numbers that you want to present? But of course I did. He was my boss after all. And it really looked better all of a sudden. And he said, well, this step that you took today, this is what you need to do when you want to present at Apple. And from then on, it really changed the way that I looked at slides. And I saw it with other people's slides as well. And of course, if you look at presentations from the marketing or PR department, these are obviously more visual designed, and when you compare them to the finance presentations. But yeah, that design language of making clear presentations is throughout Apple. Yeah,
that is at least one very small reason why they're so different. That is not the case for many organizations out there. I mean, having this mindset and knowing that every single person in that organization cares about how they're communicating, that is rare to see. I don't know what's your experience with the other organizations that you're working with, but I would say that it's rare. At least what we see with our customers, it's not.
I have to put some remark on that. My experience are based at the period of 2008, 9, 2010. I don't know what it is like at this moment, but when you look at the presentations that Steve Jobs gave and you compare them to the presentations that Tim Cook gives right now, you see a very cool development right there as well. Because when Steve Jobs presented, it was all about Steve Jobs' story. And those slides were mainly some key words, some key figures, and that's it on his slide. And he was on stage almost all the time. And when you compare that now to Tim Cook and the way he presents, I mean, I think we all can agree that Tim Cook is not as good as a speaker as Steve Jobs was. But that's okay, because the way he presents and organizes an event like a product announcement nowadays is that he is on stage very small bits of time with slides that really are big and visual. There are a lot of visual moving elements on those slides, and the way he switches with other speakers makes that it's still very cool to watch, especially during this COVID crisis time when they all pre-recorded it. But if you notice that design language throughout the years is developing as well, and it's really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking about design, obviously I mentioned the book. Are you planning to publish that in English? Like, what's your
well,
thinking?
if it's about me, if of course, if I could decide, yes, it would be in English as well. But that's actually a publisher's choice. So we still, I don't know. Maybe there are publishers listening now. International publishers say, well, maybe we can make a deal and we can make this an international book. Yeah, of course. But I'm afraid that's not up to me. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that it's not your decision, but it makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, for everyone who is related to publishing books or has friends in there, ping us or ping Maarten. He can
get in contact with me and I'll connect to the publisher. Yeah,
absolutely. So you talk and you do a lot of presentation design. Obviously, you work with a lot of people in that regard. Like, what are the top advices that you give to people when you're working with them and when you're teaching them about slide design or presentation design?
Yeah, well, most of the time, the thing that not a lot of people are really focusing on is that it's not about slides, actually. So I start my slide design trainings with slides are just slides, and please look at them like that. The message is what's the most important, your message, the story that you have to tell. So when someone asks you to give a presentation, don't just open up your laptop and open PowerPoint and start typing what you might want to present. But first think of what do you want to achieve? What is your message? And if you have that message, then you can ask yourself the question, do I need any visual aids to help me present that story? And if the answer is yes, maybe it's not slides. Maybe slides are a good way to help you present your story, but maybe it's just a flip over. Maybe it's a whiteboard that you can draw something on. I mean, PowerPoint slides are not the thing that you always need when you have a presentation. So that's actually the first lesson I try to get across.
Okay, so that is, by the way, very, very cool to hear, because I think that especially in the corporate world, people are just defaulting, to having slides. And sometimes, as you say, there is maybe a better choice, or maybe there is no reason why they would have slides, and the slides won't help, but make it even harder for the audience to understand and grasp the message that needs to be conveyed. However, let's say that they have slides and they need to design them. Yeah. What's next? Like, what are the things that they need to be they need to know about so that they become better? Like, so how do we go?
Well, again, I will take it a step back before that. If you think back of your high school, I think you and I both had teachers that had a board with chalk,
okay.
And a wiper to wipe everything out. If you look back at that period of time and you think of your math teacher, that was difficult stuff that he or she had to explain to you. So if you think back of what did that math teacher put on the board, it was the graphs, it was the difficult things that you could not understand when you would just hear them verbally. So that is good information to put on a visual aid behind you, because then you have the stuff that you visualize is actually clarifying what you're trying to explain or emphasizing a certain emotion. This math teacher did not write everything that he was saying also on the board. No, it was just the graphs and just the numbers that were difficult to remember. That was on the board. And now if you look at slides, that's actually the same way you should think as well. What is my story at this point? What do I want to explain in this part of my story? What does the audience need to better effectively understand what I'm trying to say here? And if that means that you need a graph on your slide, put a graph on your slide. If that means you need just 2 keywords because those keywords are necessary to understand what you're talking about, just put those 2 words on the slide. So only put on the slide what your audience needs to better understand what you're trying to say. And that is, of course, the other way around than a lot of companies do nowadays, that they put everything they want to say on their slides. So you get actually the same that you hear as that you read. The common mistake.
Yeah, the so-called wall of text.
The wall of text, or in many cases, the grocery shopping list. Yeah, you put on there what you wanted to remember to buy, or in this case, to say to the audience. So you put your text on your slide for yourself and not for your audience.
Yeah, I'll never forget when we were working with one of our customers and we were doing an IPO, initial public offering presentation for them like 2 or 3 years ago. One of the guys that was running the financial part, we told him that his slides actually are not going to be that detailed anymore, and we're going to simplify them tremendously, and he needs to rehearse and prepare, and all of those notes that are actually on the slide will go in the notes section, etc. And he was like, wait, how am I supposed then to read from them? And I'm like, in your question there is a problem. How am I supposed to read from them? I'm like, you are not supposed to read from them. You're supposed to use them to help you convey the message.
Yeah, and especially with presentations with numbers and financial data in it. What I always find so, maybe irritating as well as amusing is that there is this table on the slide. The speaker at one point says, well, this is a very important number. And when you look at the slide, that number is actually 0.05% of the whole slide. So if that is a very important number, why is it so small on your slide? And why is it just wiped away with all the other information? So especially in the world of presenting data, and especially financial data, there's a lot to improve.
What about online? The world changed. People still use slides though, and still use PowerPoints, Apple Keynotes, Prezis, beautiful AIs, various nowadays pitch.coms, etc. Like there are a lot of new tools on the market, but PowerPoint and Apple Keynote and Google Slides, I think, still dominate, especially the corporate world. Now that we have it online and people are presenting them online via Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, are there things that people need to take care of, like change in the way they approach their designs? What do you think?
I mean, it would be easy if you could just use the presentations that you used to give in real life and just put them onto Zoom or onto Teams and expect the same effect. Because it's different. What I hope that at a live presentation, people look at you and listen to what you have to say, and they use your slides. Maybe you have them physically as a backdrop, and they can help understand what you're saying. But when presenting online, there's a big difference, because when you start to use slides, you actually start to share your screen. And the moment you share your screen, you put yourself as a little stamp in the corner, a very small webcam. So people can actually not see you as well as they used to see you in live presentations. So your presentation takes over everything. And depending on the device that your audience is watching your presentation on, it actually pushes away not only your webcam, but also the webcam of the other participants, let's say in a meeting. So if you're watching on a phone or on a tablet, you only see the slide that takes over everything. So which it doesn't have to be a problem, but it's good that you realize that people cannot look at you anymore and cannot look at the others anymore. And especially for presentation where interaction is key, you should consider to stop sharing your screen every now and then. For me, that's the most important thing, because I've watched master classes and someone just shared their screen for 3 to 4 hours long, and you're watching slide by slide by slide by slide, and there was no contact with the speaker at all. So that would be my first tip. Whatever slide you use, only use them when they are, think back of that math teacher with this board behind him. Think of when do they really need a visual aid to understand my story better? And if not, stop your screen share so that you have every room on the screen of your audience for yourself and for the other participants. So that would be the first thing. And then when you think back on live presentations and you think of the slides that you could have as a backdrop, it doesn't matter that you are talking for 20 minutes and there's only just one slide as a backdrop where only the subject is on. But that's not very suitable for online presentations because you cannot put your slide with screen share for 20 minutes on with just one word. I mean, after a few seconds, they know what topic you are talking about. So if you do use slides to really put information on it, not just one word, but really put information that your audience can help them to understand what you're saying. So the whole, well, you might call them ambience slides, are not very suitable for online presentations. So only use the slides where there is information on that people really need to understand your message.
Yeah, these are for sure, especially the first one with, hey, just stop sharing for a minute, come back to the slides if they bring value, then stop sharing again if the slides are not adding anything to the discussion. This, by the way, I would say, and I would add to that one, that it also adds this dynamic to the presentation, and the fact that something changes in such a big way in front of the eyes of people is something that stimulates their attention, right? That captures their attention because something changes in front of their eyes, which means that is also a thing that will help you re-engage the audience even, which is 2-in-1, right?
Yeah.
Like
and every now and then just realize, what is my audience seeing at this moment? Is it seeing my webcam, just my webcam? Okay, understand what they are seeing. Is it a good image? Is the light good? Everything else? Is the sound good? Okay, if you start sharing your screen, what am I sharing? What are they seeing? Are they seeing just my slides and what is on them? Or are they seeing the rest of my laptop screens with my mail open in the background and stuff like that? People do the craziest things nowadays. So continuously realize, what is my audience seeing on their screen? And ask at the beginning of a session on what devices people are watching the presentations. Because if you know that everyone is watching on a laptop or on a computer screen, it's a big screen. So you know that. And you know that when you share your screen, people will still see the other participants. But if they are watching on a phone or on other smaller device, don't expect them to see everyone else. So interaction will become a problem.
Yeah, I don't think that many people understand that people nowadays consume their presentations or internal meetings or whatever. They consume them sometimes on their mobile phones.
Yeah.
And they're consuming those presentations on their mobile phones while being outside.
Yeah.
Where there is sun shining in those screens and so many other distractions.
Yeah. So maybe even consider not using slides at your live meeting or your live presentation, but maybe design your slides so you can send them up front so that your live meeting will be about discussing what you wanted to say during that meeting. We have to rethink how we present and how people will receive it.
Yeah, that's also an interesting point. I think that there are some cases where indeed sending the slides beforehand, which also means that because you are not there with the slides should be more detailed, right?
Yeah, that's
a little bit more
detailed. Slide docs, right?
Yeah, the so-called slide docs or slide documents, of course, and they should be a little bit more detailed. And then you send them before the meeting, and then it's a discussion, but not exactly a presentation anymore.
Yeah,
that is also an idea that people who are listening may want to take and consider. By the way, I was talking with Simon Maarten from iFu Presentations, our colleagues in the UK, a few days ago. Actually, yesterday. It's not a few days ago. And some of their customers actually had a very interesting case also for the virtual aspect. So they were doing the presentations online, right? But then iFu and the customer pushed in the direction of repurposing the content. And in their case, in this specific situation, I'm just sharing this because I think the listeners can take some ideas from that. And I don't know whether or not you have seen any customer doing that. I think it's a very interesting case there. They asked iFu and our colleagues to take the recording of the meeting, right? And because they had to create a summary for the higher level management and the executives inside of the company. But this was a meeting that's, let's say, 45 minutes. They were not going to send the 45-minute recording to the CEO of the company, but they actually edited the video in such a way that for 2 or 3 minutes, right, it was like an after movie,
Cool.
So only the key points of that same presentation was sent to those executives, which I found really good idea for some specific cases. Again, not for every case. Or as he said, and as I'm sure that you have done in the past, they also created a slide a document that they sent indeed that is a little bit more detailed after the meeting, because they were not able to participate, but they wanted to see what happened there in detail. But that idea for editing the video just a little bit and cut and remove some things and just adding fade transitions, like very smooth transitions, like nothing special, nothing fancy, nothing like incredible post-production or anything like this, just cutting the noise, if you wish.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like what those tech blogs are doing and tech YouTube channels like TechCrunch that says after a Samsung or Microsoft product announcement, watch the whole event in just 8 minutes. Get to see everything they announced in just 4 minutes. It sounds a bit like that, yeah.
Actually, I yesterday watched a video like that because currently there is this CES event, and I was watching this NVIDIA and all of those guys and what they did in 8 minutes, in 4 minutes. So it's very much close to indeed. So the masterclass, 4 hours, 15 people. Tickets are already, yesterday there were some people that actually purchased tickets for your masterclass. What can people expect? It's a very private group of 15 people only. You have a moderator on your end to help you out with the interactions also. What can people expect from the masterclass?
Okay, the masterclass is, the title is Slide Design, the Essentials. And that's what it is basically. When we are designing slides, when we work at companies and we have to design slides, we often do what we see that our colleagues are doing. And we know that this is not the best way to design them, that you don't need all those bullet points, that you don't need all that text. But one, it doesn't take a lot of time, and two, my colleagues are doing it, so my audience will be used to it as well. Well, that idea I want to deal with. So the masterclass is targeted at people who know that they want to do more, but they don't know how. And let me be clear, this is not a PowerPoint button tutorial. I am not going to tell you where is what button in PowerPoint to add this or that effect. It's a masterclass that we will touch on different topics that help you to make more effective visual slides. We go on a journey in which we'll touch on design principles that you see everywhere in magazines, on billboards, but also how they apply on slides, like white space, contrast, balance, stuff like that. We will look at what tools do you have, opening what software you want, what tools do you have to build a slide. And we really are literally looking at what is the function of shapes, of text, of video, of imagery. And when you look at visuals, what visuals do you choose to add to your presentation? And of course, a very important question, where to find them and how to use them, stuff like that. So it touches everything on all the topics when you want to bring your slide design to a next level, but focus on these are the essentials. So it's not nitty gritty little tricks here and there. It's really the stepping stones you have to take to
and I think that nice your idea of making it too independent is also a great thing, because different people use different things, but the principles behind it are always the same.
Yeah, I don't mind if you use Prezi or Keynote or PowerPoint or a whiteboard or just pictures from a picture book or a poster. I don't mind. These principles are about how you design a visual aid. And it's up to you which visual aid really suits your story. Yeah. But of course, in many cases, it will be presentation software. And from those cases, in many cases, that will be PowerPoint. But it's not necessary to use PowerPoint to attend this masterclass.
Yeah,
we will draw a little. We will draw a lot. I have some exercises in it where people have to draw. And why draw? With pen and paper, so they are not focused on where do I do this in PowerPoint? Where do I do this in Keynote? Because when you draw, if it's pretty or not, when you draw, you think of what should be on this slide and how big should it be, and how do these design principles translate into my drawing instead of the digital.
And it's very
parts.
important, I think, to mention and to add that this masterclass is actually fun for people who are not designers, right? We are not chasing the designers. This is for the business people, in the same way as I'm not a designer, but I spent a ton of time even before 356 Labs at all, trying to figure out like, how can I create slides that look outstanding. Turns out that you don't have to be a professional designer to pull this off. You just need to know those fundamentals and then play with them, right?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with the tutorials, with the cool effects and with the magic morph and the zoom functions, etc. in PowerPoint. But I am not the one to explain it to you in the best way possible. For me, every time Microsoft comes with a new version of PowerPoint with new effects and stuff like that, I watch tutorials of people who are just focusing on one trick. And that's what I say to all my trainees in the past as well. If you really want to learn the software better, watch YouTube tutorials. It's full with them, and they are way more helpful than I could explain it to you.
This information is already kind of public, if you wish. It's not that well structured, but many times you can.
But the question is, why do you use it? Why do you use it? What does the design that you make, what does it communicate? And is that the most effective way to help you presenting your story? Those are questions I'd like to answer in this masterclass.
Yeah. So going back, by the way, to the tools, because you have worked with more or less every single tool out there, including Apple Keynote at Apple. What's your take on that war that's happening out there? Prezi, Google Slides, Microsoft, beautiful AI, Canva. Canva is also now capable of exporting, right, from a few months, exporting to PowerPoint. And many people who are users of Canva are like, wait, that is super cool. Let me build my presentation in Canva and then export to PowerPoint. Like, what's your take on the war of tools, as I like to say?
The war of tools, yeah. Well, for me, my favorite tool and how to use them is actually quite a journey, because when I was in high school, we did not use any tools like this, presentation tools, in class. We just had to present standing in front of the classroom with a poster with some cutout and pasted on images on it. We actually did not use digital presentation tools back then. So that's how old I am now. But PowerPoint was alive back then, and the moment I started, I actually discovered it in high school, and I really liked how you could make sequences and add the animation, stuff like that. I actually, and this is maybe quite embarrassing to say, but there was one moment in high school I actually used PowerPoint to design a love letter to a special someone. Yeah. And I know I really sound like a nerd when I say that, but she actually reacted quite well on it. And it actually turned out in a nice relationship after that. But the moment I entered Apple and I was forced to work with Keynote, there was a whole new world for me. For me, Keynote was so far better in everything than what PowerPoint was, because PowerPoint felt clunky and it felt hard to understand. There were so many menus and stuff like that. And for me, the transitions in Keynote back then were so much more cinematic than it was in PowerPoint. So I still remember I gave a presentation at my bachelor's on my internship. And when we were in the questions round, the only question I got was, how do you do that in PowerPoint? And that was the only question I got on the whole thesis I was presenting there. So for me, Keynote was the number one presentation tool with its requirements that you need a Mac, of course. But from 2015, when I was actually doing slide design as a professional and helping customers with their slides, it's actually only like 5 or 10% that's actually using Keynotes and asked me to design a Keynote. So from that moment on, I was forced to work with PowerPoint again. And that was the period I started to fall in love with PowerPoint again. And I saw how great of a tool it is. And that if you really take some time to get to know it, now I actually, when I switch back to Keynote, there are some functions and little things and tweaks that I can't find in Keynote that I'm so used to work with in PowerPoint. And then there is this difference between PowerPoint for Windows and PowerPoint for Mac, and still the differences between those two. So I think, as much as an Apple fanboy as I am, I would prefer PowerPoint this day on. And I think people who know me would think, well, what happened to Maarten? Because is he actually promoting PowerPoint now? Yeah. And that's why I also hate the whole negative image that PowerPoint has. People say, oh, PowerPoint is crippling your presentation and stuff like that. No, man. You as a designer are crippling your presentation when you're using tools like that in the wrong way. And so for me, PowerPoint is a awesome tool to present slides with. And I think it's more awesome than Keynote because I can do more with it nowadays. And I think it's more awesome than Google Slide because of the possibilities. And as a designer, I want to be able to tweak everything. And that's still not for me good enough possible with Google Slides. And there was also, I had a little fling with Prezi as well. I really love Prezi and the way that you can use Prezi to really visualize your story. And of course, at Mr. President, we are experts in how to use Prezi to do that. But then again, I also think you should be an expert to use Prezi the way it's meant to be. And if you're not an expert and you're just that fun colleague at your work that really wants to impress its colleagues with some flashy, interesting, swooping transitions, then you're actually are crippling your presentation. So Prezi for me is a fantastic tool, but only if you really know what you do. And if you don't, please don't use Prezi because it can really make a roller coaster attraction of your presentation.
Yeah, Prezi can be tricky. Indeed. It can be tricky.
Yeah.
Especially, as you said, for people that are not familiar with it or do not spend enough time understanding it, could be tricky.
Yeah. So these for me are the big three, and of course Canva, and there are a lot of smaller companies that have their own presentation software right now, and from all of those companies, there are actually some things that they really do well. But the problems with those smaller companies is compatibility. So the only way to survive in that world is if you have a way to extract your or export your presentation to something we can all open. And I think for Keynote, that was a problem as well, because of course you could export keynotes into PowerPoint, but still nowadays, 2021, there are still so many things that are not translated well when you export something like that. So that's actually the bottleneck for all those smaller companies, I think, still nowadays. So it might sound boring, but for me, PowerPoint still is the number one. For me as a designer, of course, in combination with Photoshop and Illustrator, stuff like that. But for me as a designer, PowerPoint is the thing that everyone can open and that nowadays is far better than it was 10 years ago, and everyone can learn as well.
Yeah, and the cool part is that all of those guys, Google, Microsoft, and Apple, and all of the others, obviously Prezi, all of those four companies are announcing and pushing the limits. And especially Prezi, probably with Prezi Video, pushed the limit quite a lot. But PowerPoint is also pushing the limits every month with new ideas, new designs, new features, which is so nice to see that PowerPoint now gets the love that it needs, like so many people out there globally use PowerPoint, and it seemed like before 2016, it seemed like it was forgotten.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, Microsoft are just announcing a new version, but it's the same as the old one.
Yeah.
2010, 2013, 2016, nothing seemed to change. And this is 10 years, wow. And then Office 365. And boom, everything changed.
Yeah.
So that is definitely PowerPoint is definitely still dominating the market, and especially like dominating the market. I was about to say whether or not it's just corporate, but it's not just corporate. Like even people that are Mac users are using PowerPoint and not Apple Keynote.
I think for me, the one trick, and it sounds silly, but for me, the one trick that really put my PowerPoint back into my heart is that the function from Keynote to use the magic move tool really helped me visualizing my stories, because it was easy to animate. I could make things more important, less important on my slide with just the flick of a button. And the moment when PowerPoint introduced magic move for me was really, it turned out to be one of the most important features I missed when trying to make presentations in PowerPoint.
Yeah, Morph is definitely incredible. Definitely incredible.
And we are finally now in a stage that Morph effect is also available for everyone else that's using Microsoft 365, because from 2016, I guess it was introduced. It was for a long time. It was you could only play it in Microsoft 2016 and only on certain computers, and you had to be in the developers program to use it before the rest could, etc. But nowadays, I could safely design a presentation using effects like that and really take the benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have one almost, you can say, one of the questions. It's one question before the last. Let's put it this way, which is we started asking people, hey, like, because our community is so small, meaning the people who care about presentations, but we try to grow it. And obviously the conference is also one tool that we are going to utilize to make the community bigger. But the podcast obviously here, and everyone's podcasts and websites and marketing efforts in our world are helping with that. But we're trying to invite people who our guests notice that they care about presentations, or they're involved with presentations and they really put a lot of effort into what they're doing. So is there any person out there that made a huge impression on you for some reason, but the reason has to be presentations? Like, is there somebody that you think we need to invite here? And who would that be?
Of course. There are a lot of people that have really interesting stuff to say about presentation, but I think
I'm writing down.
For me, one that really stands out the last, I guess, 2 years. I've known this person for a while now, and this person was not in presentation before that, but he started his company, and his name is Marco Pesch, and it's a friend of mine, and he is doing presentation trainings now, how to increase your comfort zone. And for me, what really stands out in his approach is the way he is focusing on the things that go well with a presenter instead of the things that are not so good. Okay. You understand what I mean? So it's focusing with a very affectuous way of positivity to really focus on what works well for someone and to really improve that part instead of trying to put, which I see this in the world we live in. A lot of presentation trainers are focusing on, well, you should use your hands like this, and you should use your voice like this, and you should blah, 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 blah. We're trying to mold everyone in some kind of perfect pitch presentation format. And what I think is really refreshing is the way that he has another approach. It's a very positive, fun approach, and really lets people feel where their strength is and really build on that. So I think concerning the topic of presentation, that could be a great guest for your podcast.
So again, his name Marco
Pesch. It's Pesch.
Wow. Okay. Pesch. Interesting.
Pesch. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? One more, if you have one more.
Oh, one more.
That's enough. Normally, that's enough. One is enough. But if you have one more, let's go.
No. On top of mind, I don't know. This is one person I think I have really on top of mind. So
perfect.
I should skip.
I haven't heard about him, but what you said is
he's quite new to the business. Yeah.
Is very interesting. I would recommend absolutely everyone who is listening to this one to double check his work also, because again, let's make the community better and let's make it bigger also, because I believe that there are incredible people out there that you can learn from and that you can take some ideas, and those ideas, I don't know what's your take on it, but I'm sure that you have seen a lot from this, that one presentation can change your life forever. So if you're great, or if you try to get as good as possible in communication, in presentations, in more or less communicating your ideas and conveying your ideas, you are going to, how can I say it? You're going to win big. you are going to win big and differentiate from everyone else, because these skills are still so rare. And these skills are so rare.
But on the side note, on that part, is that one presentation that changes your life. I think that, and that's maybe also with the masterclass that I'm doing at the event, is that there is a lot of focus on the people who stand on the big stages and for them how to present in a better way. But for me, it's maybe more important to look at everyone in the workplace. People who have to present to their colleagues day in, day out, or to customers. And maybe these are not the presentations that change your life, but these are, if you can improve your skills for those people just for a little bit, these are the skills that help you make the deal or not, or these are the skills that help you to get that promotion in your work, because you are the one who's always presenting the ideas in such a way that everyone else is saying, wow, I love the way when he's standing in front of the group. So for me, that's an important part for the book that I written, but also for the masterclass. If there are so many rotten presentations been given and so many people that know that the presentations they give are not very nice to listen to. So if those people who are enthusiastic about improving, that for me is maybe a far more important development than this one person on that big stage with this perfect presentation.
Yeah, can't agree with you more. So what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Well, the company that I train a lot for nowadays is, of course, Mr. President. So that's on mrpresident.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, but it's difficult to do that phonetically because my name is Maarten van der Schaal. But I guess you will put it in the show notes.
Yes.
And maybe for people who are more interested in the visual part, I also have an Instagram account, Maarten VDS, which I mainly share street photography in the Netherlands. So it's a bit close to presentation design and choose the right visuals. I love to do that in my personal hobbyist life as well. So on Instagram or on LinkedIn.
I'll also make sure that we link the book. Don't forget about that one.
And don't forget the book. Yeah. So for the people who are in the Netherlands, of course, they can buy it everywhere. For the people who are across the borders, they can also buy it everywhere because it's on Amazon. The only thing is that you need to know your Dutch language.
Yeah, but I can imagine there is quite some visuals in it.
There are quite a lot of visuals in it, and I will keep you posted, and maybe then the audience when there will be a nice English translation.
Yeah, we actually purchased it. The last time after we ended the call, I went on and purchased it. And here on our team, they were like, why are we buying this book? And I'm like, why not? I mean, why would you care that's in Dutch? Still, there are some visuals, there are some ideas, and maybe even some of the Dutch can be understood, like if you want to understand something, I may want to put it in Google Translate and see it for myself, so why not?
So if I'm looking at the sales stats right now of the book, there's just like one spike in Bulgaria.
Yeah, maybe that's us. that's us. We purchased it from Amazon.co.uk though. I don't know how are you tracking this stuff?
Yeah, no, I don't know as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I will make sure I will link all of this in the podcast show notes. So everyone check all of those links out, check the book, check Maarten, follow him on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Again, Maarten, thanks for sharing. And thanks for joining.
It was really nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation and for this lovely conversation.
Yeah, we can obviously talk about this topic for hours and hours.
Of course.
But again, if anyone who is listening has a question, let us know. Just shoot us a message on any social media platform and I'll make sure that I'll tag Maarten and we'll make sure that we reply and help. Okay. From here, visit 356labs.com and not 365labs.com, Maarten. There are still a lot of people that type in that one, the letter one, and still are asking, well, what is going on? Like, why? Where are you? What's happening? So that you can check and see what we're able to do for you and your company, how we can help write, design, and deliver truly effective presentations for you guys. And do not forget, Maarten is also going to be part of it. Present to Succeed, our conference. This is the biggest presentation skills event in the world and it's coming in April. So make sure you get the ticket for the event and for Maarten's masterclass. Thanks for listening. And in case you found this episode useful, and I'm sure you did, subscribe to the podcast and why not even leave us a review on iTunes or share it with a friend, we would appreciate it. Thanks again and see you in the next one. Bye.